Welcome to Fraction of a Teacher, the podcast where two trainee maths teachers navigate the wild world of teaching, equations, and everything in between. I'm Francis.
And I'm Jen. Join us as we reflect, share stories, and have a laugh about life in the classroom. Whether you're thinking about starting a career in education, a trainee teacher in the thick of it all, or just curious about what it takes to shape young minds, you're in the right place. So let's dive in. Hey guys, we're back. Hi Francis, by the way. Nice to see you.
Hi Jen, good to see you again. He's still smiling, which is just awesome.
Well, when would I not be smiling? I'd be very concerned about that.
Yeah, you are brilliant. Keep going.
I mean,
you found the right one.
What a way to start a podcast. Do we even need a starter?
Yeah, well, we've got one planned, so you've got to do a starter.
Yes. Okay. On that note, let's get started. So today's starter is, what is your favorite book and why?
Who's going first? I bet you're very well prepared.
No, as unscripted as we are, this I do have in the back of my head because this is a question that came out of uni this week. We were talking about cross-curriculum learning and obviously very aware of how important our role is to ensure that we promote literacy both in mathematics and across the school. So a really good question. That is absolutely a question a kid will ask us at some point in time. And I think it's really good to have an answer ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those little signs on your door that says, Miss is currently reading whatever. Yeah, you're going to have one of those and change it occasionally so it's believable.
Yeah. I mean, I have it on the bottom of my email at school about what book I'm reading. So currently I'm reading this. So if I'm emailing parents or emailing kids, then I have a little signature at the bottom saying with what I'm reading.
You're so good. I have not even begun to think of that. Go on then. What is your favourite book, though? I bet it's not the same as my one.
My favorite book is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. The reason it's my favorite book is because at the time it was written, it gives a really good perspective that to find love and happiness, you have to challenge your own views about what you think you want and also the views that society place on you as well. And I think it's one of those books that it's a lovely read. I love reading love stories. It gives this understanding of how people almost have to throw everything to the wind and go, it's my happiness that here and I'm going to do what I want.
Wow. That is both awesome, and I now feel really embarrassed because I don't think I've actually read it. Perhaps Mr. G now needs to be reading Pride and Prejudice. You've sold it. You made it sound a lot better than I thought it was going to be, actually.
It's a really good book. I'll lend you my copy.
That would be awesome. Maybe I come back and do a book review on it once. You sell things well. You've done a good job there.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. You're always so complimentary of me, Francis. Thank you.
You're awesome, Jen.
On that note, what's your book?
Well, it's a book called This Thing of Darkness, and it's by an author called Harry Thompson, who sadly died not too long after he wrote the book. It's a historical fiction. It's about Charles Darwin, who's incredibly famous, but also Captain Fitzroy, who in the world of nautical history and weather forecasting history is incredibly influential too. So you've got these two amazing figures from history who sailed together to South America and the Galapagos, and it's fictional but based on historical events. It covers the relationship between the two men, their discussions, Fitzroy, a committed Christian, Darwin, who's beginning to test his theories of evolution, and their eventual falling out over that, mental health and Fitzroy's sad ending, which I won't spoil. It's just a fantastic book, beautifully written, so descriptive, and I love anything to do with the sea and exploration. For me, it's just amazing as a book to read. You can get completely lost in it in another world. For me, that's a great thing about reading, is that ability to just everything else melts away and you're really focused on what's going on in another world. So that's mine. This Thing of Darkness by Harry Thompson.
I love that. It sounds like a very you book. I would love to read that because I always like to put myself out my comfort zone. That sounds like something I would never pick up, but probably look at going, oh, that sounds interesting. So maybe we should do book reviews, swap
I will
books.
dig it out and pass it your way.
Oh gosh, this will be a very interesting podcast.
You can put it in a pile of next to your pile of maths books you're reading and enjoy it.
Absolutely. How do you promote literacy within your lessons? Do you?
So I think there's perhaps two bits. One is from a sort of maths perspective, this is key. And it really surprised me when I was talking to an experienced teacher I know who said that her pupils were struggling to access the GCSE maths questions, not because the maths wasn't good enough, but because they couldn't understand the written questions.
Oh.
And that just really shocked me. And this was a couple of years ago before I came into teaching. And I thought, what a shame. We've got people who are easily capable of the maths, but can't access the questions. So I think there's something really fundamental there. And if you look at the curriculum and some of the National Centre for Excellence in Teaching Mathematics and CETM work on sort of oracy in mathematics, there's a lot there about being able to articulate your reasoning. I think there's then the broader literacy across the curriculum that we've just been talking about, what you read. And I think what's interesting for me is so far the impression I get is that in general, girls read a lot more than boys. As a boy who likes reading, potentially there's something I can do to try and help find hooks that might help pupils find books they enjoy. I feel like that's the key, is finding something that you can engage with, whether that's books, blogs, magazines, and everything in between, but finding something with subject matter that can engage readers. And I think that's something that I'd like to be able to do, particularly within my form tutor group. When I get one of those myself, is something I'm pushing. Long answer. What about you? I can't imagine you're not thinking about this. You must be
Yeah.
considering this.
I definitely think about this. In placement A, they had 5 minutes of silent reading at the beginning of every lesson, which started in COVID during when teachers had to move between classes to keep kids focused and actually something they carried on. I had never seen it before and I really enjoyed it. But a part of what I enjoyed about is then asking students after that silent reading, what have you read about today? To make sure they were reading and not just flicking through pages. I really enjoy reading. I've always been a lover of reading. I've read the dictionary, Francis, 4 times from front to back. Um, being dyslexic, I didn't know words. And actually, this might shock you. I didn't speak for the first few years of my life because I had some issues where I didn't know how to use my tongue, which sounds really weird, but as a child, nobody ever told me that. So for the first few years, I said nothing. So I read so that when I spoke, I knew what to say. So I've read the dictionary quite a lot. So I'm
You're
a
making up now.
Do you know? I thought you might say that. This is why we started a podcast now, to help me with my literacy.
It's working. You're talking beautifully.
Lovely. But yeah, so I'm a big advocate for it. And within my lessons, I will tend to get kids to try and use the words. Say we're doing fractions, I would be like, okay, talk to me about your numerator and your denominator and get them to use those words when they're telling me 2/3 minus 3/5. I would try and get them to use the word denominator. Be like, well, the first denominator, I would then do this, and that would mean the numerator would also be multiplied by 5 to help them to understand these words as they see them in the paper. I try and use those keywords as much as possible. And very much towards the end of lessons that I've planned, I will always use worded questions to get them, again, understanding how words will appear in the exam paper.
That is a beautiful link into lesson planning.
It's like we planned it.
And the lesson planning. So, okay, I think we're going to have to be really strict ourselves. Sort of pushing through this at a good pace. Would you be able to give a 1 minute overview of how you plan lessons? Do you think you could do that?
Yeah, I can definitely give it a go. Might be a minute and a half, but I will give a quick overview. And I think before I start, what we will say is there will definitely be other podcast episodes where we come back and explore different elements of this because it's such a big topic. but yeah.
Absolutely. I think the 1 minute overview will give us a hint as to where we want to focus a bit today.
Hmm.
And then from that, I think we're going to pick up some ideas to go into more detail in the future. Are you happy? I've kind of put you on the spot there. Are you happy?
So just an overview of how I lesson plan, yes?
Go.
Okay. So the first thing I do when I lesson plan is I head to the scheme of work, a lot of prompting questions about how long am I covering this topic for? What are the learning outcomes for this? From there, I then go back a year. So I think about where is my floor? What am I starting from? If this is year 8, I'll go back to year 7. What should they know? What is my base knowledge? From there, I then think about what's coming next. So where's my ceiling? Where are they going next year? What is my top limit? What's the next topic? And there's a lot of research that currently aligns this to ensure that they're developing the necessary knowledges and forward thinking. So we're kind of thinking about where we're going. From there, I think about that end goal. So where am I going at the end of this topic? What's an example question I might be wanting to get to? And this really links to backwards design. So I tend to use a backward design where I identify desired results, determine evidence that will meet that, and then plan learning experiences and instructions from that. So I start with a big idea and then really focus on those essential questions. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but that's where I go. From there, I think about my cross curriculum and I think about my application. So real life application, personal finance if I can. And then from there, I'll look at planning a section of lessons altogether. And then something that I've been reading about recently that we will talk about. I'm just gonna mark this here and I'm gonna go pimp my lesson, Francis. I'm gonna come back to that.
Yeah.
And then from there, I really go into thinking about resources, manipulatives, and representatives, thinking about my adaptive teaching, my misconceptions, equipment needed, keywords, definitions. That's how I lesson plan. What time am I at?
Yeah, just a shade over 1 minute, 2:22. That was beautiful because you just gave a feel for big chunks how you currently go about it.
Yeah.
Um, so just a quick question: has that changed much? So in the few months we've been teaching, has it evolved, or did you start off by doing this? And do you see it shifting now, or do you feel like you're pretty
Mm.
set? How static is that?
I would say it's a dynamic kind of document. So I've got a OneNote document that I've been developing from day one to now. And a lot of it is research based, where I've got bits of research into every element of that. Something we'll share on our website about
Right.
how we do that as well, just to give people more of an oversight. As I read, I tend to add to it or take things away. So it goes with my learning. There's definitely things I've spent more time focusing on. And also in line with what the university is asking us to do, we've been asked to look at the use of assessments and developing that. So I've been focusing on that as well. So I've added that in. But I would say it's an ongoing document. I don't think it'll ever be finished. It will just be refined.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be some time till we're content that we've nailed the way to do this. That was a good run through.
Okay, I'm going to time you. Let me know when you're ready, and I'm going to press the start button.
So I've got a bit of a process overview, which we can put straight on the website. So I'm going to use that as my structure. I'm ready to go now. I've got it up.
Okay, you're off.
So really similar to you, starting off with a scheme of work, and something I've realised there, starting a new school, there's different ways of having a scheme of work, different styles, how prescriptive it is. So it may or may not be a useful starting point, but it's certainly where I feel you've got to start. I then look at a topic level. So across my series of lessons for whatever it is, statistics with year 10, what am I trying to cover? And what is my end point I'm trying to get to? So I then look at some exam questions or end of test questions to give me a feel for where I'm trying to get to. And this is at topic level. I then look at an overview of the content that's going to get me there. And I draw an A3 actual kind of pen and paper mind map of that. And I kind of have a clockwise circle starting at the top with the foundational knowledge, then working around what are the different bits of knowledge we bring in, and then top left up in the kind of 10, 11 o'clock position is those exam questions we're targeting. I then think about how I'm going to approach teaching those elements within that. And there's a really good book by Ed Southall called Yes, But Why. This book, Yes, But Why, gives a great understanding of the background, mathematics, and the kind of pedagogical approach, which I then begin to build into how am I going to teach this. So in that mind map, and then thinking back to the prerequisites, what knowledge the pupils need to access this new topic, what concepts are fundamental to this, and how am I going to either confirm they've got that or give a little bit of practice and make sure they're solid on that prerequisite knowledge. And where are those links within the curriculum? Where does this come up elsewhere? Where is there some commonality? Identify some potential misconceptions and do a kind of common sense check on that. Again, at topic level, look at the keywords, and the NCETM's glossary is really good for that at kind of key stage 3, bottom end of key stage 4. Then I schedule and plan how am I going to break down that big mind map on A3 into individual lessons, and where does the homework sit in that? For an individual lesson, then, it's a bit of a mini cycle on that. So I've got my A3, I know which bit of that clock face I'm working to address. What is my aim or title? What's the lesson? What's the learning objective that I'm generating? But what is that bit that I need students to leave the room really understanding? What are the key words related to that? How am I going to lead into that? What are my prerequisites? What am I going to include in the starter? How am I going to teach? Is there one method I'm going to be teaching that concept, a couple of alternative methods? And I'll often then look at, say, Open National Academy textbooks, departmental slides to get some feel for how I can do that. And then I begin to construct the detail of the lesson, look at a plenary, and then it's a bit of a cyclical approach. I go back through, does the lesson actually flow? What resources do I need? Do they fit? Does that work together? Does it cater for all abilities? What if they've got a higher level of knowledge at the start than I expect? What if it's lower than I expect? How am I going to assess it? Does it fit my A3 topic plan? Have I got that right? And then I end up in a bit of an iterative cycle until I'm happy. I bet that was more than a minute. Sorry.
It was 3.5 minutes, but you did a good job.
Yeah, that 27-minute podcast is looking pretty ambitious.
Well, let's focus on the fact that we're talking about a big part of our teaching career, or not so much if AI has anything to do with it. Different topic to talk about a different day, but I really like that. I really like the fact that we start with the scheme of work and then we almost mind map it out about where we want to go with this. We have slightly different approaches in it. So my question for you is, Francis, what bit are you really wanting to work on?
That's a great question. I was just hoping you would ask that. I think for me, it's about getting the resources. It's how do I find the right questions to ask? I've got an idea of what the crux of the lesson is. I understand how I'm going to approach teaching that, but then how do I find the right questions? There are too many resources to choose from, and that's just the bit that's taking me time. Finding the right resource and working to mash them together into something that I feel will work for that group of pupils at that time for that topic with the aims I've got for the lesson. And that's the bit I feel I've got a long way to go on. Hopefully that makes sense.
Definitely that makes sense. There's so much to think about when you're thinking about lesson planning. It's never just what you're planning to teach. Are you having the same kind of feeling that I am like that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to Jen. There is so much to look at here, but I'm really intrigued. You talked about backward design. I think I maybe know what you mean there, but can you just expand a bit on that backward design bit? Because I think that's pretty critical in your system for lesson planning.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, a book that I'm reading right now is Rethinking the Secondary Education, which is a human-centered approach to education. And I feel like backwards design really sits in this, so really clear, coherent, intentional learning experiences for pupils. And there's a lot to unpack there, but something I've been really focusing on right now and seeing how it fits with my lesson planning is Wiggins and McTighe, which is MCTIGHE, 2008, gave this acronym WHERE, WHERE. And the W is where are we heading? Why are we heading there? What do they know? What might go wrong and what is required of them? So really starting quite broadly about a little bit of those misconceptions, a little bit of where we're going. Okay, so then we have the H, which is hooking the student onto the topic. When I mean a lesson hook, I mean an attention grabbing that almost is used at the start of a lesson to motivate or to promote this curiosity amongst students. I heard this really great quote that says, if math is the aspirin, then how do you create the headache? There's this thought behind posing an intriguing or a thought provoking question, almost giving them a problem that they then have to solve. And then obviously then providing them math to solve that. And I really like the idea of hooking this into to students. Have you heard of that before, Francis?
Yes, I'd love to say I'd really used it, but I feel this is something I have not properly explored, and I'd love to be that. I'd love to be the teacher who asks a big question at the beginning of the lesson, and then the kids are engaged on that. This is something I need to make sure I try out in this new school placement.
Yeah. So for instance, in my last placement, I would pose a GCSE exam question at the very beginning of a topic on the board and then go, this is where we're getting to. This, you're going to solve this after this unit module without making them get to a point where they go, oh, I'm never going to solve this, and going, but this is where we're getting to. We're not there yet, which is quite a nice thing. So I'm working on it. Definitely not fluid in it. Something I'm definitely focusing on.
I think that's definitely possible. I think, as usual, within saying it's like selling it. I think you'll be absolutely able to smash that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then E is exploring and experiencing ideas and being equipped with the necessary understanding. R is this rehearsal, revise, and refine, so opportunities to practice. And then the E is the evaluation. So that might be where the assessment comes in as well. So it's a really nice little acronym for something I'm trying to implement into my lesson planning at the moment. I feel like I'm not somebody who's going to stick to one specific way of lesson planning, more taking bits that I find really helpful and refining them and see how they work. But yeah, something I'm focusing on right now is this backwards design because I feel like I'm a goal orientated person. So it kind of fits naturally to show students where they're going to go, and actually reduces math anxiety. If you know where you're going and you know that we're going to walk your way through it, where's the fear? I feel like it then almost takes the fear away from the math because we're going to get there together. And I'm not saying solve this now.
Yeah, I like that. And I think something else that you're doing in placement A school, which again I'd like to sort of start, is giving pupils a feel for how you're getting on in terms of progress through the scheme of work. You know, what topics have we done? What concepts have we covered? What's coming up? And just situating them. And that's something I feel I could do a lot more of, doing a lot better. And I think that comes back to that kind of scheme, that understanding in their minds of the topics, helping them establish that. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, what I do is I actually put all of the topics we're going to cover on a slide at the beginning of my lesson. Then every lesson we go through, we've done this, this, and this is where we're going next. I saw a teacher in science do it and I loved it. I could see that the students were already relaxed shoulders. They saw how much they had progressed. It shouldn't be a surprise of what's coming, so why not give it to them? Why not tell them what we're doing and all the topics we're covering? I just think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it links to treating them as adults and the mutual respect. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you talk us through a little bit of this concept mapping? Because this is something I've taken from you. How wide do you go? Do you go across the curriculum? Do you go across the whole scheme of work? Or is it really focused to that specific area?
So I think for me, it's the scheme of work for a specific topic. That scheme of work is probably going to be anything from just under a week to just over 2 weeks. That's perhaps around 10 or 12 lessons at most. So I think that's as wide as I've gone. But then within that mind map is where the concepts connect to other areas. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about learning to become a maths teacher, is beginning to see links between concepts in maths that I had never spotted before. Like, I feel like I broadly learned maths at school as a set of discrete kind of concepts and processes, and I keep stumbling across stuff that shows me the links now. And wow, it's unbelievable. I hadn't realized that, but it's yet so obvious now. So I think something I'm trying to build in is being more explicit in those links between concepts. I'm sure there's some research that explains the benefits. As someone who likes seeing things on a page, that kind of mapping helps with that. I think the awesome thing I'd love to do one day is to extend that and go across the whole curriculum. And rather than just having one mind map per topic, how do those mind maps join up? If I put all my A3 sheets on the floor, how much space would it take up? But how can I draw some kind of links? So maybe that's one for the future that I'd love to do. A little bit like a more detailed version of that awesome diagram we've seen for the GCSE syllabus, which connects the different topics together in the curriculum.
I was gonna say that I love that little, it looks like a galaxy, doesn't it? It's all the different concepts within the GCSE math and how they all interconnect. I guess it's something I wish, I don't know if I would have appreciated it as a student, but I feel like it would have deepened my understanding of math and that everything links together. But maybe we can share it on our socials for people to understand what we're talking about. Yes, that exact thing. Maybe we can share it on our socials to give people a view of it.
William Emeny, and it's spectacular. For me, that visual representation really helps. We should definitely make a note of that. The other bit that I've been thinking about from a book that I really enjoyed was a book called Why Don't Students Like School?
Yeah.
It's Daniel T. Willingham. This book's really great in looking at what can we do as teachers to help students engage with material, enjoy it, and get them thinking. There's a really great quote from that book, which is that memory is the residue of thought. That really sort of struck me. How am I making sure that my pupils are thinking about the right things and focusing on those? And that's going to create those memories that's going to allow them to come back and use that knowledge. So for me, that's a real focus, is how do I help the pupils do some deeper thinking in lessons and really engage with the material. At basic level, it's things like using mini whiteboards. I know everyone in the class is having to go through the process of answering questions and see their answers, get that live feedback, and then taking time to walk around the class when they're doing independent work to that they are thinking hard. One of the challenges, if we're not doing that, is, for example, asking a question of the class and just picking one person to tell you and answer that verbally. I think the risk is that actually you don't necessarily know that the other 29 are thinking. And I think that also links to the concepts of challenging everyone at the appropriate level, linking back to those sort of principles of mastery, but really ensuring that not only are those at the top of the class being stretched and having to think hard, but those in the middle and at the bottom, and being adaptive in the way that you're prompting that thinking.
I love that. I really want you to write a book of just quotes you found in books, by the way.
But we've got our socials to have a whole lot of these on, thanks to Sophia's awesome work on those.
Oh, and Sophia's coming on the podcast next week, which I'm so excited about.
I think our listeners are pretty excited. They're like, God, it's going to be good to have some new voices. I was going to say guest, but she's not really. She's very much part of the team.
And it's half term next week as well, so we're going to be talking about well-being, looking after ourselves, time management, how we make this a sustainable career, which I think will be a really interesting topic. This has been quite a heavy topic. I feel like we've covered a lot of condensed material. Shall we do something fun for the listeners and talk about our pets? I'm sure they've heard my birds in the background, and we should address the birds in the room, if I'm honest, and make sure that the people know they're not like a bird's not flying around their car or their house or whatever they're listening, wherever they're listening to this. Because we both have pets that will definitely feature, especially like when we're talking about lesson planning. I use my birds all the time as part of my lessons, and you've obviously got pets as well. So I think they're great tools to use as kind of activities. And
it's the hook.
Yeah, it's the hook.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the idea that you're going to have to tell us all about them now, but I love one of your lessons in particular that you taught us about, which involved the pets. And I just think that's brilliant. If you listen to the first bit of episode 1, I'm sure there's one of your pets gets in there before you start us off. So go on, introduce the pets.
I have 8 birds. Well, my partner has 8 birds. I have one bird. His name is Taylor. He is a cockatiel, and he was an egg when I first met him. I got to name this bird. Interesting fact about cockatiels, you don't know what sex they're going to be until 6 weeks after they're born. So it has to be a unisex name. So I went for Taylor because obviously I love Taylor Swift, but Taylor could also be a boy's name. My partner convinced me that Taylor was a girl, She was convinced Taylor was a girl. And so I was like, ah, Taylor, amazing. What sex is Taylor? Taylor is a boy. In one of my lessons, we had a new egg, and I had my year 8's name the new egg. It was a great conversation starter in terms of feeding, money, ratios, how quick they grow. I use it for so many lessons. They're just great little creatures and very cute. It's nice because birds aren't naturally trusting, but they come and sit on my shoulder. Francis, we've been on a call and Taylor's been sitting on my head. So, I mean, it's lovely that a bird trusts me so much. But yes, we will put a picture up on our socials of the birds or a bird. I will put Taylor up there as well.
Taylor would love that. I mean, he. I can't remember.
It's a he. It's a he. I'm still not over it's a boy. So let's not dwell on it too much.
I would love that. That's definitely got to be up there. The boy, Taylor.
So yeah, that's my pets. Francis?
So my daughter's convinced me it was a really good idea to get 2 guinea pigs. We rehomed some guinea pigs from a friend, and they're called Pippin and Puffin, and they are great fun. I'm just trying to check in where they are now. They're quite cheeky, quite noisy. They eat a lot of vegetables, much to my wife's disappointment. They keep eating all the veg before we get a chance to eat it. But they're great fun, and I inspired by Taylor and your kind of antics on this, I really wanted to start working them into lesson plans. We've only got them since I finished my first placement, but I think there's so much we can do on this. And I think it's a great way of sharing a bit of your personal life with pupils without it feeling like it's too much. I think it's something they'll be able to relate to. So I think it's a really great way. And I'm really looking forward to my first lesson plan that features Puffin and Pippin somewhere in the background. I think they're 2 boys. So the friend said, yeah, they're definitely 2 boys. That's fine. I kind of hope they are, because otherwise we're going to have risk of Puffin or Pippin being a girl and us having a lot of baby guinea pigs. It's not something I think I get over very well here. So I'm a bit nervous about that. But so far, no baby guinea pigs.
Well, I mean, this could be interesting. This could be a gender reveal all over again. Will you keep us posted on whether it's male or female?
Yeah. Okay. So my slight concern is that Puffin. So they're about 5 months old, so they're still growing. But Puffin's getting bigger pretty quickly, and he could just be putting on weight, or maybe Puffin isn't a guy. So don't worry, there'll be a status update. You'll be the first to know.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Looking forward to the update. I'll let you know if there's more eggs. I'm trying to convince my partner to keep 1 or 2 more birds. Because I mean, what's 10 when you have 8? We'll see how that goes down. Not well, from the look I've just received.
Maybe you need to get your kids to calculate the cost and the space they're going to take up before you make decisions like that.
Absolutely. You mean the pupils at school? I have no kids. Besides 8 birds.
You don't need kids if you've got 8 birds.
Absolutely. Definitely don't have kids.
That is brilliant. More to follow from those guys and girls. Are we going to finish off with our 3, 2, 1?
Let's do it. So we've got a nice plenary today. And again, I feel like we're going to come back to this topic multiple times, but I feel like that was a really good overview. So our plenary today is something that we picked up from my partner. She is a soccer coach. So thank you very much to Claire for this plenary. Definitely fits here. So we are doing a 3, 2, 1. So 3 things that we've learned this week, 2 things to focus on this week, and 1 question that we still have. So Francis, do you want to do your 3, 2, 1?
Okay, I've done a little bit of thinking. So 3 things I've learned. Coming to second placement schools really opened my eyes to differences between schools and different ways of teaching. And as always, there's not one right answer. There's different ways of achieving educational outcomes. And that's been fascinating to see. And I'm really excited about seeing a whole lot more of that, understanding different ways of doing things. I think I've really learned too that, having said that, really enjoying how approachable the kids have been in my second placement school. Just at the first one, where they're working through some maths and you can just walk up and say, "Hi, how's it going? How are you getting on?" They just open up immediately, really happy to chat. And I really enjoy that. The ability to just chat and ask them a couple of questions and help them out has been great. And their honesty, so I haven't got a clue what's going on. I love the fact that they can be so honest with someone they've not really met before.
Yeah.
And I've learned a bit about questioning this week, and that's been part of our intensive training and practice, the ITAP week. What I've learned about questions is that I don't know much about questions, and that there's a lot more to learn. I feel like that's kind of scratched the surface and opened up a whole new world of depth of thinking about questions. I had a few big picture ideas, but actually that's something I really need to dive into. And then now I've begun to feel like know what I don't know. Do you want to do your three now, or for you learn, or should I carry on to my 2 and 1?
I was just thinking, shall I do my 3 things I've learned as well? They're a little bit similar. The first thing I've learned is actually very similar to the questioning is how important questioning is and how important it is to vary your questioning. So some questions are closed because you want an answer, and actually probing questions are really important. And we did something called a checklist for effective questioning, and I'm really intrigued to try that out at school tomorrow and start really looking at questions through a more critical lens, because like you, I don't think I ever used questioning. I never considered this deeply, so it's definitely something I've learned, really enjoyed the last few days. Something else I've learned this week is there's no one way to approach teaching. We did a little bit of cross subject grouping today, and although we're all in the same course, we have completely different styles. No one style is better than the other, and how important it is to learn and have a healthy appreciation for every subject on the curriculum. And the third thing I've learned is that schools are so different. On the outside, some schools may look very similar, but actually, when you get to the environments and the crux of it, they're so different. This is important when you're thinking about your career and what you want to be. Being in placement B and kind of going to a few of the schools we've been to has really highlighted just how different placements can be. So take it for what it is, and you can learn from every single environment, regardless of your view towards it.
We've actually ended up having independently generated these, ended up in a similar place on the top 3.
Right?
While you're speaking, what are the things you're going to focus on or looking
Yeah.
to change and evolve over the next week or 2?
Okay, so we're not surprised that my use of questioning is going to be one of the things I'm focusing on over the next week. I feel like how I use questions, how I critically review my questions. One thing I liked from an article that you weren't here yesterday, but I really enjoyed reading about was when someone's observing you, you ask them to write down the first 10 questions you ask to the class. And then you go away and reflect on them, how you did them. Are they the type of questions you want to ask? And then you go back and discuss it and then review it and then repeat the process. I really like that. So something I'm going to get my teacher to do is write down, if they can, every question I ask. I want to then go away and review that and refine that process, because I feel like that would be a really crucial way for me to develop. Definitely would read that article. It was really, really helpful.
We should put a link in.
Definitely.
Yes, I like the idea, and I think the challenge is when I'm teaching, when I'm at the front of the class, I don't have time to really capture sort of exactly what I said and how I phrased it, and that would be really slightly terrifying, but really powerful to have a look at what you actually asked. And I'd be interested to see if that's how you meant it to come across. Yeah, okay, I love that tip.
And the other thing I want to focus on is developing that hook. So like I said a little bit earlier, is again, continue to develop that hook and refine how I develop that hook in my lessons.
I like that. Good link back to what we discussed.
What about you?
So 2 things which are really kind of early placement things for me. One is getting to know the pupils. I think we talked about the power of knowing names. And then I think the other one is getting a real measure for the style, the way my department works. So I've seen most of the teachers in the department now. I'd like to go and see the rest and understand what are the kind of key things that are done in this department that I need to be consistent with. And when I'm taking on classes who are taught by different teachers, what are the things that those classes are used to? What are in the routines? Which of those routines do I need to therefore integrate into my routines and make sure that I'm consistent with the class teacher? Or where do I see it quite differently to the class teacher? And am I going to need to explain and teach the way I'm going to do it differently and bring the pupils with me on that journey? So for me, it's about knowing the pupils and getting a real sense of how my department operates before I start taking on teaching about it properly. Finally, what is your one question? What's the thing that's on your mind right now at the forefront of how you're going to approach returning to school?
So actually, it's really interesting. It's more about the job hunting. It's kind of really been playing on my mind is how do I understand or read outcome tables when assessing a school for whether I want to work there? There's a link to outcome tables on the Gov website, and I feel a little bit lost with them, if I'm being perfectly honest. How do I read this? How do I understand what this means in terms of attainment? It's pretty much -1 to one, but actually, what does this all mean? I don't feel like I understand it enough to be able to inform my decision. So that's my question I have this week.
That's a really good one. Yeah, that progress 8 score and, attainment and how the GCSE grades and what should you be looking for? What are the clues? Okay, let's have a think about where we might be able to source some kind of information to help us and hopefully others on that, because it's a great question.
Yeah.
Not the one I thought you were going to come up with. That's a really good question.
I'm sorry to disappoint.
No, well, I my one feels pretty basic in comparison.
Stop it.
I'll be honest, at the forefront of my mind is how quickly do I want to build up my teaching load, and how am I kind of ready to take on a lot? We talked a couple of episodes ago about go slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I also think I need to get more efficient in lesson planning. I need to really gain experience by taking on quite a bit early in this second placement. Another thing I really want to do this sort of half term, these few days in school, is really get a good feel for making sure we've got the right plan for how I'm going to kind of take on that teaching load.
I love that. No basic question there. I think that's a really good question because we've got assignments due in, we've got 3 ITAPs, and we come to the end of this, and then we've got a week left, and then we're fully fledged teachers. I still think we're always going to be a fraction of a teacher. Well, maybe that'll be our plenary for next week. How much of a fraction of a teacher do we actually feel? Because we said we've called ourselves fraction of a teacher, but we've not given ourselves an actual fraction.
I love it. And actually, if we've got Sophia on as well, that'll be a great intro.
Yeah.
I love that. Definitely.
Amazing. Well, another one bites the dust, as they say. But yeah, really enjoyed this one, talking about lesson planning, how we approach it. To the listeners out there, if there's an aspect of that you want us to go over or put zoom into, it'd be great to hear one, what you're reading about, what you're focusing on yourself, how do you tackle it? Do you do a different approach to we do? Or is it something we've talked about that you're keen for us to know about?
Absolutely. Great to get a bit of feedback from our first episode of this week's feedback. So thanks. Please keep the feedback coming. It's really lovely to hear from people.
Definitely. It's always, yeah. Perfect.
Right. Thank you so much, Jen. Look forward to talking again soon, and have a great few days in school.
Yeah, you too. I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Fraction of a Teacher. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your fellow teachers or friends. New episodes released every Thursday morning at 5 o'clock.
Follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Fraction of a Teacher Podcast for updates, behind the scenes fun, and more content. We would love for you to get in contact with us with your ideas, any questions you have, or things you'd like us to cover. Please email us at fractionoat@gmail.com or message us on social media. Until next time, keep smiling.
And keep solving those problems.